give props to this movie. It goes right into the riots.
Yes.
It goes straight into it. Doesn't waste any time, and I'm thankful for that because it's like.
If anything, it takes that minute that it devotes to like kind of drawings in the beginning. You know what I mean?
I will just slight thing. I would have preferred a voiceover.
Yeah,
I would have preferred a voiceover for that opening like animation because
there was a bit of text. And it was like just kind of very glossed.
It was so distracting. I know what they were going with because it had a lot of that very very famous iconic paintings and it animated them,
especially the jazz era too, in this era and stuff like the mural style.
Just you could have put a voiceover there because I was too distracted with the text. But anyway, that's very minor. But it just immediately gives you that animation, then cuts to the riots and how they start, and then the second act dominates this movie, where I would say
at the Algiers Motel.
Exactly, I would say it almost turns into a horror. If not at least a thriller, because. When all your characters are stuck in this hallway to this overarching force that cannot be stopped.
They're like pressed against a wall.
Exactly.
Too. Their torsos are facing the wall and stuff. They're apprehended, basically.
And it's extremely claustrophobic, compounded by Bigelow's constant need to put the camera right in the actors' faces.
Oh yeah,
which I love. And again,
you still get a lot of emotion out of that too.
And like never before has shutting a door and bringing a character into a room felt more terrifying than in this movie.
Yes. And like the thing too, and first off, I really do believe that like where the Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, like most war movies or war centered movies, like most of those, they had a broader appeal. The people that are gonna watch Detroit already really know that and recognize about the problem with police brutality and stuff. So it's a little bit preaching to the choir. Not that's not a criticism. I think that's just a detail about the movie. But the thing too about this movie that's a lot like Get Out, and this is what I said too. I don't want to spoil Get Out or anything like that. It's too new and whatnot. But we talked about. Remember, you and I talked in private on off air, and we talked about the ending of Get Out and how Get Out with the cops and everything. How with the cops, it's like instead of like a moment of like relief, it's a moment of like true fear and stuff like that based on circumstances. And that was like the great thing about Get Out, because so many people saw Get Out, was that kind of like, whether people know it or not, expose their recognition of like what it means with police officers in that sort of a situation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
what it means to be black amidst a police force that doesn't exactly view you as equals to everyone else.
Exactly.
As one person put it, this is what it's like. And he was pointing, I think a fake gun, but still a gun at someone else, and he was saying, "This is what it feels like to be black, to have a gun pointed at you the whole time."
Yes, indeed.
And he's trying to convey that, and I think that was the biggest quote for me. Is that this is? He said something along the lines. I'm probably butchering the quote, but he said, "Yeah, as he is pointing a gun at someone, he said, this is what it feels like to be black."
Yeah, you're talking about Detroit, right? You're talking about Detroit.
Detroit.
Yes. Now the thing with my comparison with Get Out and Detroit is that this is the same thing with this movie too. When you were just talking about when the doors close and they go into the rooms and stuff like that. When that happens, man, when the cop takes one of the men into the room and stuff like that. But I want to talk about what goes on in the kind of room and stuff specifics. Like that. Don't want to go into specifics over here. But the thing is, when that happens and you have that fear in you, that's the fear that that's the fear that you have. The fear that you have is the recognition of why that situation is different than other situations of people. If it was maybe a Caucasian man or woman being taken into a room one-on-one with a police officer. Those are the kind of moments that I think really stick out in this movie. The kind that you can subconsciously realize that there's more ways for this to go bad than there is ways for this to go right and to be lawful. And I think that's the moment of realization there.
Real quick, I think we should have prefaced this by saying I am Asian, specifically Filipino, and Steve here is Caucasian,
Last
white,
I checked.
Specifically Polak. No, I'm kidding. But
Nice. Nice, yeah, Polish Irish, indeed.
But yeah,
for what that's worth. But no, I mean, there's a lot. Like I said, there's a lot in this movie, and I don't want to, like I said, you don't want to unpack it too much too, in terms of just in terms of, because I want people to see it. But again, like I said last break, I said this is not the movie a lot of people want to see, and this is not the movie, especially in the theater. That's why I think this is going to I think this is going to go to Netflix in about 4 or 5 months, and I think that it's going to do very good numbers. People are going to start talking about it and such. such. Like I said, first off, its release date doesn't do it any favors. The fact that this is coming out in the summer, it should not be in the summer.
That is a huge mistake on whoever was in charge of that decision.
Big miscalculation for MGM to release this in Annapurna Pictures, which is usually Annapurna Pictures is usually better about when their movies get released. They put Zero Dark 30 out. I remember they put that out in I think it was December. I think it was right around Christmas that came out that year. And Foxcatcher and Joy, they've put out those movies right around Oscar season. Why they had a hand in putting this out in August is absolutely mystifying to me.
I mean, maybe
you just don't do that.
Maybe not Best Picture, but again, for I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting his name. The villain in the movie.
The villain, Will Poulter?
Will Poulter. Like, at least he is definitely a contender for some sort of award.
Oh, no, this is going to get the for-your consideration. That's what they call it. That's when they send out the screeners to critics, like to rewatch the Academy Award potential movies. They call that for-your consideration.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And stuff. This is going to get, I bet you this is going to get a DVD. I mean, they had Sausage Party for your consideration last year. They did for animated. But, like, this is definitely going to be sent out, like, come time for, like, December and November for voting and such. But, like, the fact that this is a movie that really should have came out in October. I mean, or something like that. I mean, granted, there's no competition, but there's also really like no interest for this movie to be released at this time. You know what I mean?
Other than the anniversary of the event itself,
which was already in July anyway. That might be what they're going for. But again, like this is not the kind of event. Like first off, I'll tell you this too. This is the kind of event too that doesn't make it in your textbooks on your chapter of civil rights. They don't talk about the 12th Street riot. I didn't know much about it until about a month ago when I was looking up this movie because it was coming out.
It's usually go ahead.
I was going to say it's a footnote at most in your history textbooks.
It's usually overshadowed by Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes,
who I'm not attacking him being in textbooks, of course, but usually
he's
Martin
so
Luther
large.
Martin Luther King Jr. usually is from my anecdotal memory of what I learned in grade school and even high school in U.S. history. MLK dominated the civil rights era, and then it was like 75% MLK, 25% Malcolm X, and then nothing about pretty much anyone else.
No.
And again, there was a paragraph on saying, hey, there were riots here, and that's it. But it never really goes into it. It goes into a lot about slavery, again, anecdotally speaking about history books, but not much about civil strife outside of Southern segregation. Southern segregation is highlighted because it's very easy to portray it, right? Mm-hmm.
It's fairly an easy concept too, the duality of it.
You got a black water fountain and a white water fountain. That makes an easy picture. But the Great Migration, white flight, police brutality, that's much harder to portray.
Even if you want to go before the civil rights movement, if you want to talk about like post World War II about housing subsidizing, which
no one talks about that.
I think is highlighted. I could be wrong in the movie. It's in the movie 13th. The Anna DuVernay documentary about mass incarceration of African Americans. It's in that movie, and they talk about that, I think it's actually. Who was the one civil rights activist that came here not too long? I can't remember his name.
I know exactly.
Cornel West. Yes. Cornel West. Yeah, he talks about it in the movie, and he says out of the money. Out of 100% of the money that was used to subsidize houses for soldiers coming back from World War II, 2% was given to African Americans, and that already puts them at an immense disadvantage socioeconomically in terms of being able to get housing, afford housing nonetheless, get housing in decent neighborhoods, and get decent public schools. You know what I mean? So that already goes all the way back there, which isn't talked about in history books.
Yeah, and it kind of mentioned it in that opening cinematic. And I'm kind of glad. I am thankful that this movie did not try and kind of Tom Hanks it through history. And that's not a rag on Tom Hanks, who I love Forrest Gump. I absolutely love Apollo 13. But those are two kind of historical movies that are its own thing and probably will be decried as blasé from now on. You cannot make those movies again without really making much out of it. Maybe you could try and do it with Hidden Figures.
Yeah.
But then that's there were three of the strongest black female actors we have in Hollywood
Yeah,
today.
I still have my criticism. I think a movie like Detroit holds more weight than a movie like Hidden Figures. I absolutely
Yes.
do. 'Cause I thought
that is exactly
I
it.
thought Hidden Figures. I tell you right now. I thought going back. I don't because we didn't talk about it on the show too. I thought Hidden Figures. I thought out of all the Best Picture nominations of last year, Hidden Figures was the weakest. I really
Yes,
did.
I agree.
thought it was the weakest, and I thought it was decent. I thought it was a decent movie for the performances, but it was very. It felt very Disney. It felt very Disney.
You know, that's actually the perfect kind of contrast movie you can bring to Detroit is Hidden Figures, because
People would rather watch that too, just 'cause it's feel good.
First and foremost, that is the movie people want to see, because everyone gets their comeuppance, everyone wins out in the end, and I mean, from the start, you already knew everyone was going to win because it was the space race. You already know who won that.
Yeah, of course.
Hint: it was America, even though we were okay. Quick thing about the space race: it's kind of funny how the Russians beat us to literally everything. First person in space, first living thing in space, first object in space, first everything in space, first supersonic whatever, and then but we won by just landing on the moon. That's how we won. That's how amateur historian. But anyway, it is the perfect side. Sorry, amateur historian. But anyway, it is the perfect antithesis movie. I'm having trouble with words myself. But the perfect antithesis movie, because in Detroit, even like the helpful white person in Hidden Figures, who was played by Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner, yes, indeed.
Who again was good in that movie, and I did like that movie. But in Detroit, like the helpful white people here in Detroit are just completely helpless, and they're being beaten up just as much as the black people in this movie.
Yeah, talking about the women that were part of the Algiers Motel
and it's
incident.
like there is no savior here. There is no getting out of this, which was the true horror.
There's really no silver lining. No.
I would go all the way in calling this a horror movie, at least in the second act.
Social horror, kind of like Get Out in a way of that, like kind of new genre that's a little bit being filmed. Even though Get Out's a lot more comical in some parts, it still holds. I think it holds a similar, holds similar ground, or they operate on similar.
There's
ground.
a scene where two of the black characters are like creeping around the hallways trying to avoid the big bad monster, which in this case would be, unfortunately, police officers and National Guardsmen. And it's frightening from their point of view.
Absolutely, and like you said too. Again, people would rather watch a movie like Hidden Figures, which is uplifting.
I would. Honestly, I kind of would.
I mean, it's uplifting and everything too, but it's also. And the thing is too, if we didn't have, and this goes back to an even larger problem too, where if we didn't have movies, because I think Hidden Figures, I will go as far to say Hidden Figures was overpraised. I really do, because there was some stuff in that movie that a lot of people decry, that like people kind of just accepted. Like, first off, I thought there was way too much of a focus on the men and the women's lives. I didn't think there needed to be like the whole subtext about Taraji P. Henson's husband, or like trying to get a husband and stuff like that. And I didn't think that had any place in the movie. I really didn't.
Just let the women do their thing.
That's exactly right. And
with Hidden Figures, ironically enough.
The larger problem I'm talking about here with Hidden Figures is that people wouldn't be so quick, I think, to overpraise Hidden Figures, look over all of its like shortcomings. If we got more movies like Hidden Figures in the first place, that's the bigger issue here. We don't get a lot of movies about strong women, let alone strong women of color. So that doesn't happen a lot. So that's what leads to movies like Hidden Figures, I believe. People like, same with Wonder Woman. People kind of overlooking their shortcomings, which are very much there, because of like the larger thing represents something greater. You know what I mean?